So hello, welcome to today's episode. We're going to be talking about innovation, and it's something slightly different to the typical product innovation. We're going to be talking about managing and delivering innovation for the oil industry. My name's Matthew Laskay, and I'm thrilled to be able to welcome to you today's guest. I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, but he's a veteran of the industry, worked in a lot of the energy industries over the years, and I have to say that I don't think I've met somebody who works so hard and so diligently in keeping up to what the trends are happening in the industry he's working in. So that's why I think that his opinion is so valued by so many. So I'm thrilled today to be able to welcome Stuart Martin. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thanks for the kind words, Matthew. I appreciate the opportunity just to share some things that I've encountered over my career.
Yeah, good. So just as you mentioned that in your career, I mean, you've worked in subsea, drilling, decommissioning, and those industries are sort of closely related, but still so different. So what do you see as the main differences in how they innovate or the innovation in those industries in your experiences?
Yeah, they are, as you say, very different but interconnected. I think I'd have to flip that on its head a little bit, Matthew, and say that I don't think when it comes to innovation there are that many differences. One thing I've experienced wherever I've worked is that there's an organic innovation that happens in every company. Small incremental improvements in processes, systems, procedures. That happens every day, almost like with an invisible hand. It could be the simple de-risking of a physical process or simplifying an administrative procedure that makes things more efficient. So I don't think there's that many differences, more commonality or congruence, to be honest. Something from my recent past which makes me think about commonality is the employment of patent lawyers. And the first word of caution is never underestimate how much those people are going to charge you. It's not uncommon to be charged £650 an hour, have the benefit of their counsel.
That's innovative.
More unusual though is in innovation is the advent of big game changers or technology disruptors, as people refer to them now. I don't think in anywhere I've worked it's ingrained. It's usually forced and is normally much more planned and controlled and involves many more stakeholders across the business, internally and externally. So I don't think that I've encountered much difference between those facets of the industry. It's more a commonality, and it comes in two ways: the organic and the inorganic.
Okay, so everybody's obviously main aim is to make more money, but other than that, what do you think that the drivers are for people to innovate? You know, what's the incentive for companies to do that? Because it takes a lot of work to manage the teams and get people sort of coming up with those ideas.
Yeah, that's a good question. So clearly there's the intrinsic and the extrinsic motivators that provides the prime motivation for innovation. You know, externally there's things that we can all relate to, like a change in the competitive landscape or regulatory change, which forces a shift or a whole new paradigm to what we do or what we offer. Most recently, the regulatory changes or desire of the OGA to cut decommissioning costs by 35% started everybody on a whole series of whiteboard ideas that were then funded by the OGTC. So these prime movers can come externally.
Do you think that cut is actually going to make it more innovative or less innovative? You know, forcing people to, you know, like the last downturn, you know, everybody had to cut money because the oil price dropped down, and you know, collaboration was the buzzword and that sort of thing. Do you think innovation is going to go faster now?
Yeah, I think it'll come in phases though. You know, the Pioneering Spirit, the new heavy lifting vessel designed and built by Edward Herema, was years in the making, but it's a huge game changer. And then everybody's got to react around that. So
Yeah.
the regulations started things in terms of trying to cut costs, and then the OEM marketplace have to react. Internally, what I've seen, having worked for two OEMs in the past, Merpro and Vetco, the product life cycle is part of the reason for needing to innovate. You may have an aging product or a system, and you're starting to see the revenue go down the downside of the bell curve. And that's usually too late. A knee-jerk reaction when your revenue is on the decline is probably too late to start innovating. It needs to be much more holistic and built into the company's DNA. Especially when we've all probably realized, as is the case just now, that when the going gets tough, things like R&D budgets, marketing and training usually are the first casualties. So I think, to summarize in answer to your question, Matthew, I think there's intrinsic and extrinsic, and you're going to have to be aware that stand still and die. So you need to do something about it.
Yep, if you're not moving forward, you're going backwards. So everyone else is going to pass you, aren't they? So you mentioned there's cuts with R&D and cuts with people and things like that. So how do you think that a company can develop their culture to be more innovative rather than the standstill where we do our thing well, we're going to keep doing that well, and without getting left behind? How can they change that culture, do you think? Or how have you done it?
It's certainly not easy, and the first thing that springs to mind is that it needs to start from the top, and by that I mean you need a sponsor to take your innovation or your ideas forward. You need a leader that will provide the support and the resources necessary for the team to achieve a stated goal or an objective, and be able to tolerate the risks that go along with innovating. So I'll give you an example. When you and I worked at Odfjell, we had a charismatic leader, Seaman, who would fund R&D to try and ensure that Odfjell were at the cutting edge on terms of drilling rig technology.
Yeah.
So, unless you've got that buy-in at the top, it's very difficult. So once you've got that, I think the next step is to appoint a project manager who's going to run the project in a part technically way, a part technical form. He can manage the people positively, manage the economics of the project and prudently, and be consistent in the way things are done, almost like a chameleon, I suppose. In the last place I worked, Ardent, we did have an innovative design for removing jackets in the decommissioning sector. But the design was developed across a broad stakeholder base, both within our company, our partners. John Cox from Worley was one of them. And we also had some client input, and that can be hugely insightful and helpful towards a successful, innovative climate. I also have to say that you need to be able to accept a culture, a challenge when you're innovating. And as long as people are candid without being rude or sniping or vitriolic.
Yeah, accepting of people's opinions.
Yes, and giving people time to really flesh out their ideas and share what they want. So those are just a few things that sprung to mind about trying to set up a culture for creating innovative processes.
Yeah, so you mentioned about the leaders, and charismatic leaders are obviously the ones that people like to follow more, and you think about them being a bit more innovative and creative. But we were talking just about a few people here before we started this session about skills, and companies aren't wanting to invest in skills too much at the moment, rightfully so, because they don't want to be seen spending money. But on the other side of that, it's the perfect opportunity to upskill. And do you think that there's enough time and effort invested in people's skills on that, the management and the leadership and the creativity side versus the technical skills side?
In a word, no, Matthew. I think it's we're in a race to the bottom in terms of what the supply chain can afford to do in terms of training and developing people. I don't personally know of anyone in the industry who's got a career training program in front of them. Certainly not in terms of leadership skills, perhaps on technical, but an innovation's like a side issue. It's not going to get the focus, say, of a financial project nor a system project.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, a lot of companies have their competence matrix, and it's based on skills that you can assess. So, somebody, for instance, a crane driver goes out and maneuvers a crane, and if they successfully lift up that thing, ticked off, they're competent as a crane driver. But looking at other things, a little bit of leadership or people management, I suppose, rather than leadership, is another competency that's quite often there. But you don't see that collaboration or the creativity side of things too much in competencies. So it'd be nice to see, especially the project managers and the people who have to, help the teams come up with better solutions, rather than just stick with the traditional engineering logical solution, come up with it and off we go. Why can't we use different technologies or things?
Yeah, just an observation on that, and I'd be interested in the views of the other people joining in, is that to lead an innovation team, you don't necessarily need to be an engineer. You can be from a financial or a project background, or maybe one of the support functions of a business. But what you do need to be is a decent all-rounder and be able to have the people skills to get the best out of the team.
And you do want that wide range of team, don't you? You don't want just engineers, because, as an engineer, you're taught to analyze problems and make sure that you're risk adverse. So you're always looking for things that can go wrong, rather than necessarily trying to be creative and what could be better. So you kind of, I find that in my experience, you kind of get a little bit one-tracked on the process, because you're not wanting to veer too much, are you? But some of those innovative things that some of the engineers, you mentioned Ardent and, lifting up rescue craft and all sorts of things. They're pretty innovative solutions, aren't they?
Yes, and I can promise you that with a team made up largely of Dutch marine professionals, that got a bit challenging sometimes.
Very, very creative solutions.
Yeah. I mean, that Ardent were a company that were focused on solution-led projects, naturally coming from wreck removal and salvage. So it was, that was in their blood, so to speak.
Yeah. So obviously you said you mentioned a few different industries there. So there's a bit of a spread. But what do you see as sort of best practices if you had to suggest to companies about how they can, because innovation is where businesses are going to excel and become more profitable. So how can they sort of instill that innovation culture into them based on, the good things that you've seen?
Okay, I don't know if I'm best qualified to say what I think is best practice, but I can certainly share one or two things that I would be wary of and also try to implement if I was going back into it. The first one is to be aware of the unexpected. When you start off on an innovation project, you may end up in a different location than you were aiming for. I'll give you an example. When Odfjell decided to try and automate as much of the drill floor as possible, we actually got to a test bed SIT situation with an iron roughneck. And at that point, some institutional investors took an interest in it, and they took away the the project. That left quite a bad taste with some of the team that you know, they'd created this tool and it was ready to be a game changer, and then it was almost taken away from them purely for financial reasons. So beware the unexpected. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I've probably harped on already about the people skills, the soft issues. They've been the most impactful when I've been involved in innovation and design projects.
And the most challenging.
Absolutely. Nobody's written a book on managing people properly, least of all me. But I think you need to give people the atmosphere of open communications without fear of reprisal or belittling them, support and help them to develop their ideas. But as a project manager, I think you've also got to be realistic enough to drown a few pup when required. You know, don't leave it too late to kill off an idea, and don't do it in a tough way. You know, do it in a sensible and respectful way, and certainly don't leave it till the end of the project when you're handing out praise for good work. A couple of other things that just come into my mind. One is the best practice often is starting from a crystal clear objective. There's no fuzzy or grey lines about what you're trying to do. And then once you've got that objective, you can plan and control accordingly. And you can use tools like Prince2 and stage gate management, or the TRL leveling system to keep your project on track. But I certainly don't have a monopoly on good ideas on getting best practices. I'm sorry, Matthew.
No, that's okay, but yeah, I mean, you mentioned this a little bit, but in my experience, the best innovators aren't the ones who come up with all of the ideas. The best innovators are the ones who can select the best idea out of those bunch of ideas and ask the right questions to be able to develop that idea into an innovative solution. So, like you said, it doesn't have to be engineers, it doesn't have to be arty people or creative people. It's just got to be people who can work well together without, you know, with that openness and that trust, and without that blame culture, and then thrash out the ideas and then select from that. That's where the hard part comes.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think something related to that is that the OGTC, the Oil and Gas Technology Centre, of all the ideas that come forward to them, which probably make sense to the innovators, there's actually very few receive funding and see it through to the light of day.
Yeah. Or they might get the funding and then it sort of peters out halfway through, doesn't it?
Yes, or perhaps the drivers in the market have been overestimated, and the economies of scale that might be realised from a particular product or system are overstated. I've seen personally great ideas brought forward to the OGTC and OGIC, amongst others, that would certainly work technically and advance the industry, but would they make the running cost or efficiency impact that the innovator thinks it will? The operators are pretty quick to shoot down some of them.
All right, well, that's a pretty good tour of some experiences that you've had and some good tips for people. What I might do now, if you don't mind, we'll throw it open to some of those people who have joined in. Feel free, if you want to stick your camera on and while you're talking, or just your microphone, and fire away. I saw Peter flash up there. Does that mean you've got a question, or you just wanted to say hello? No, he's back.
Sorry, I was just playing with the video background there. Sorry. No, very interesting, Stuart. One of the things that I wanted to float, because my background, I started offshore as an ROV pilot, So I was exposed to all the bits and pieces. And then I got into project engineering and topside, but I started with small companies. And the thing with small companies is you're put more on your own resources, your own skills. Where I found in bigger companies, like your bigger especially your tier 1 contractors, to go through a very, very structured training program. And I'm just wondering what your view is. Do you think these really structured training programs sort of take away the innate innovation that engineers have?
That's an excellent question, and I would say that having a structured training in these larger companies can only help you understand the overall engineering of that particular company. But I can certainly see that when you're in a smaller company and you're more self-reliant on your education and your development, that gives you a much more free-form way of following your nose, so to speak, rather than having a prescribed training program. Be interested to see what John Cox thinks about working for a tier 1.
Yeah, so interesting that you pick on me. Yes, I do work for tier 1. They boast at the moment they are the world's biggest tier 1 engineering company due to a recent acquisition, but I'm quite lucky, Stuart. I work for a smaller division within the tier 1, so I kind of can't, well, up until this week where we reorganised, our division, which is Intech C, which is specialist in subsea works, we are allowed to get on with what we want. So although I do work for a tier 1, I effectively work for a tier 3, I guess. So they do encourage training and they encourage innovation. As Stuart may know that potentially we're going to look at, or we are looking at the technology he was talking about earlier and taking that over and bringing it to market. I think the advantage of being a tier 3 organisation in a tier 1 organisation is that the smaller part of the group will allow you to innovate, and you have the money that the larger part of the organisation can supply to do that. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword. Yes, I work for tier 1, but I'm also in a smaller division of a large engineering company, which does have its advantages. And it has its disadvantages, obviously, because business plans you have to write are quite horrendous, as I've just figured out.
And complex.
Well, thanks for that, Jim. So just to summarise, Peter, I think that for me, there shouldn't be an over-reliance on the company providing for your development, and I do think there's a need to be self-reliant on at least partially on your education and understanding of the industry.
I think what Peter said earlier.
Sorry.
I think what Peter said earlier before we all started. Great time to launch a company just in the middle, a training company in the middle of a pandemic, because the first thing our big organisation did was cut discretionary spending, which included a degree of training. So we definitely cut that back. Will it have consequences moving forward? I really hope not, but you've got to keep up with modern trends and you've got to keep up with developments. And if you're not training your individuals, which for a company like mine, who I work for, our product is our individuals effectively. So we don't have machinery, we're not a factory, we're an engineering factory. So if you don't keep your equipment going in a factory, update, things collapse and you get behind. And I just hope that isn't the case, not just with us, but with all organisations that have decided that it's time to cut training, because a training in an engineering company is effectively maintenance in a production company.
Mm.
Yeah, what's that old saying? Decide in haste and repent at leisure.
I think just I've got a little bit of insights actually into some of the developments within the kind of training aspects solely within the kind of oil and gas side. So I started my business, Peter. I started end of kind of February time, so right on the when COVID kind of hit and we were in lockdown. So I offer quite a lot of varying kind of technologies and innovation solutions for kind of ATEX industries. We have recently signed an agreement with an HSE training platform, virtual reality, which is currently being deployed by Royal Dutch Shell. So some of the content that they've got available is the video was done on a turnaround at Shell Pernis, but they've actually got some live scenarios where you can actually go through and do the training through a headset. So I think for the interesting point, we were obviously discussing this kind of prior to the call kind of starting. The budgetary side of things and the training costs for putting guys up in hotels and then having the trainer come in to country, etc., etc. This is a way that it can actually be done remotely. The beauty of the Warp VR platform is that you can actually tailor the scenario so that the guys are never encountering the same scenario twice. So you can literally, it's got like wee kind of boxes and then kind of links in, and you can actually move the scenario about to tailor it for John's side of things, maybe in the kind of warehousing side, or you can do it for offshore assets. I'm just in the process of speaking to folk about ATEX 360 cameras, because obviously nobody's going to want to take an asset offline in order to provide the video for this type of solution. But I think there's definitely going to be a step change, I think, in the industry, and there does seem to be a bit of receptiveness in the market to these new kind of AR, VR, XR kind of solutions. So that's definitely an area that I think there's going to be massive improvement. Gas detection as well is another kind of big area where there's now a product from Blackline Safety from Canada that I work with, and that's got an element of kind of contract tracing and lone worker protection. So I think the innovation just now is really driving to help the guys in the field and to ease some of the kind of problems that the industry is definitely kind of encountering. So
I think that's a great point. Yeah. It's a great point that you can actually still have some training without the on costs of hotel and travel. That I hadn't thought of that. That's a significant advantage.
Again, if anyone's wanting any of the information, I can pass that on to Matthew, then he can kind of share it out with guys, because
Yep.
I think obviously everyone's kind of switched on engineering wise on the call just now, so I'm happy to kind of share some information with you guys, and yeah, if you've got any kind of questions or anything, we can get kind of calls kind of set up with these guys if anyone needs to drill down a little bit further.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Andrew. And I think that the key things there you were mentioning is it's benefits to the people. You know, they can actually see the benefit and the outcome from it. So using these technologies is driving that change.
The good thing with Warp VR is that you actually get scored on a star rating, so that's then obviously sent to a kind of supervisor. So unfortunately, I've not been on an oil and gas processing facility before, so I on my first kind of run through I only got 3 stars, but you can actually get those actionable kind of insights. I think that's a big thing for the industry as well, as actionable insights. It's all well and good having the data and getting the data sets. It's then how are we using that? So there's going to be an element of data science that's going to be involved. I mean, some of the projects that we're kind of looking at getting involved in. I mean, there's massive amounts of data sets. I mean, you're talking 59,000 sensors potentially, and they're talking about all your various condition monitoring, your humidity, your temperature, your vibration. So I think, and what the market seems to be kind of saying to me is that there's great technology out there, but there's nobody there that can actually do a kind of end-to-end solution, from building the kind of initial 4G network, through the mobility solutions, through the IoT sensors, implement the right applications, because some people are paying £35 a month for an application. They've got 6 applications running simultaneously when they can easily condense that into one. But if you don't know what's out there, and then you've got the management of change cycle as well. So the bigger the organisation, the more hoops you have to jump through, which is something that Stuart had kind of mentioned, which is definitely so. But again, having the experience and having the knowledge with the kind of project management, the PMP experience, the Prince 2, the Lean Sigma 6, and Scrum Masters, having all these guys in play to kind of help with the kind of process is probably going to help people, because digital transformation, depending on who you kind of talk to, some people squirm and other people are right up for it, because it's an interesting mix in Aberdeen when you look at the operators, the EPCs, the service companies, the OEMs, and everything else. Everyone's at a different stage in the journey, so being able to kind of add value and help people along the digital transformation journey is definitely key.
Yep, brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. A lot of good buzzwords and keywords you mentioned there. So it's you know, definitely what people are thinking and talking about. It's just about trying to get them to action, I suppose. And like Stuart said, we'll find out soon. And John said, hopefully we don't suffer as an industry too much by the last, you know, the 6 months outage of people not keeping the skills up to date. Any other questions for Stuart?
Yeah, this is going to seem facetious, but it's not. As was mentioned earlier, you have decades of experience in the industry, and as a mere youngster, what would be, from my side, what would be?
I never said decades. I said veteran.
What would be your biggest takeout from your time in the industry? Your biggest lesson learned that you would pass on to the group?
That's a tough one, John. Well, I'll just say what came straight into my head was that I don't think you can be successful in this business or get ahead if you pigeonhole yourself. I think you need to be a good all-rounder. Part engineer, part project manager, part business development guy, understand QHSE issues and the people stuff. So my short answer, John, would be try to be as rounded an individual as you can, and be open to other perspectives and take something from your experiences, both good and bad.
Thank you.
Good answer. And the longer you go in your career, the more you realise how pulled you get into those different directions, don't you?
Yeah, one of the great takeaways I've had in my sort of 36 years in the business is that it's a brilliant industry to be part of. It's dynamic, it's challenging. It's allowed me to see parts of the world that I never thought I would ever. And I still find it exciting to this day to see what's happening right across the value chain, from exploration right through to production and decommissioning. There's so many aspects to it. I think I've been really lucky to have worked in a sector that's provided all that stimulation.
Yep, good point. Any last questions before we let Stuart run off?
Yeah.
Oh, Peter's back.
Yeah, I heard you talking about soft skills, and that's something very close to my heart, because in projects, either project engineering or project management, most of the time you're actually dealing with people and all the different issues. I just wondered if you could expand a little further on your view on soft skills and their place in the engineering environment.
I'm really happy to try and do that. I probably spent more time as a manager and a director trying to get the best out of people rather than grappling with commercial and technical issues. And there's a few things that'll stand everybody in good stead, and I think honesty and candor are the underpinnings. But also trying to see the good in people before the bad, give them the chance to succeed. I know that when I started out, I must have been a nightmare coming from a sort of an accounting and financial background to begin with into the technical side. So be honest, be candid, be consistent, and understand that people don't set out to screw up intentionally. Give them time to regroup when things have gone wrong and support them. I think some basic training for when people are moving into roles that involve managing people, some basic foundation training around the motivational aspects and body language, those would be fundamental if I was starting my company today.
No, thanks very much for that. And I suppose as I've got older and older, I've realised more and more it's about the people.
Yes, I would take the view, honestly, we can get around almost every commercial, technical problem. The people ones are much more convoluted and multicoloured and multifaceted. And you won't always get it right, but try to just have that consistency of being honest and giving praise when you can, and not going overboard when things have gone wrong.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for that, Stuart.
Thank you, Peter.
Right, thanks, Peter. Probably got time for one more if someone wants to get one last one in. Nope. Right, well, thank you very much, Stuart, for the time to openly, as you always do, openly talk about your experiences and your opinions and viewpoints. You know, learnt so much, and as I said, because you're so involved in what you do, you tend to pick up a lot of different tips and points, and your opinions are always said valued for that reason. So thank you everybody else for joining in, and there've been some really good questions, really good conversations going on there. So we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Stuart, for that, and everybody else.
Thanks for putting it on, Matthew. I've sent that information on Work VR. I've popped that across to you just now. So if you want to
okay, if anyone wants that
on to the guys, just feel free to forward on. But
yep.
great to catch up with you, and hopefully look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yep. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, guys. All the best. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Stuart,
everyone.
as ever. Fantastic.
Cheers.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Matthew.
Bye-bye, Neil.
Gents.
Great.
We'll stick it on for the end there.